Injuries are part and parcel of professional wrestling, and anyone who is thinking of getting into the business expecting to live a pain-free life is kidding themselves. After all, the job calls for repeatedly landing on your back while offering your body to others to batter at will. It's inevitable that, somewhere along the line, you are going to get hurt. And injuries are one of the main causes for careers coming to an end, whether it's the culmination of many minor ones or one big one that does it. Because really, you've got to think that Hulk Hogan would still be going out there dropping the leg in his 70s if his back wasn't being held together by scrap metal and crazy glue. And hey, Steve Austin would probably still be stomping mud holes if he wasn't the owner of a bionic red neck. Career-ending injuries can be a bitter pill to swallow, but they don't always have to mean the end of the road. Wrestling is replete with stories of superstars looking like they're done but coming back, often on a full-time basis. So here are 10 examples to give the likes of Jason Jordan, Tyson Kidd, and others hope. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic.com, and these are 10 wrestlers who came back from career-threatening injuries. Join us. Number 10, Ric Flair. Ric Flair's career was almost over before it even really got started when he, along with 5 others, were involved in a plane crash that took the life of the pilot and left NWA United States champion Johnny Valentine paralyzed. The private plane crashed in Wilmington, North Carolina on October 4th, 1975 at 6,000 feet and only a few miles from the runway, breaking Flair's back in 3 places. Doctors believed that Flair would be lucky to walk and lead a regular life again, let alone wrestle. The dirtiest player in the game was determined to make it back to the ring, and when he felt that he had healed enough, began training. The Nature Boy had dropped from 250 to 180 pounds after the crash and began to hit the gym hard. He was back to bending bones after 6 months, at least half a year earlier than he should have. In a twist of fate, Flair's fortunes could have been very different that day, as he had complained about sitting in the front seat next to the pilot before takeoff, eventually switching with Valentine, who took the full brunt of the impact. When the Nature returned, he did so as the kiss-stealing, wheelin'-dealin' villain that would make him famous. Number 9, Lita. Lita grew in popularity in large part thanks to her daredevil, high-flying style, being the first female star in WWE's history to regularly and spectacularly perform moves like diving Hurricane Ranas and moonsaults. And she was beautiful and had red hair and her knickers were sticking out of her pants, yes, but while her physical appearance may have grabbed viewers' attention, it was her physical abilities in the ring that held it. Her popularity even got her booked as a guest on the series finale of television show Dark Angel in the spring of 2002. For her role, Lita was tasked with performing a Hurricane Rana during a fight scene, but unfortunately, she didn't have one of WWE's finest catching her, and the stunt double she was working with dropped her on her head and shoulders. What was initially thought to be a minor stinger injury was, in fact, a full-blown broken neck which required major surgery. She spent her time in recovery by volunteering at a local animal shelter and had a spell as a commentator for Sunday Night Heat, but it would be almost a full year and a half before she could get back to bumping. Lita made her grand return at Unforgiven 2003 and would go on to enjoy great success in the years that followed. Number 8, Edge. Pick a part of the body, and the odds are that Edge has either torn, broken, or otherwise injured it in some form or fashion. The Rated R superstar is no stranger to the operating room, and has had more than his fair share of setbacks during his long and illustrious career. These include a few, yes, not one, but several, that could have easily put a stop to his time in the ring, and for a while looked as though it had. The first was a broken neck in early 2003, necessitating a trip to see Dr. Youngblood, who must have put his kids through college via his work with WWE alone and spinal fusion surgery. The Ultimate Opportunist came back over a year later, and despite the occasional torn pec here or there, seemed to be in good nick. Then, while wrestling Jeff Hardy on a July 3rd, 2009 house show, he tore his Achilles tendon, another major injury that would require at least a year on the sideline. Oh, look at that, he was back by the Rumble, and won the bloody thing. Good for him. Edge would eventually have to retire due to the condition of his neck in 2011, only to come back again in 2020 because it's clear at this point nothing short of decapitation will prevent him from doing what he does best. Number 7, Jesse Sorensen. Jesse Sorensen is perhaps the least known name on this list, but his injury was among the most severe. Sorensen, a young man in his early 20s at the time, was cutting his teeth in TNA's X Division and seemed to be on the up, feuding with the likes of Kid Cash and Austin Aries in the title picture. However, when wrestling Zema Ion in the opener of 2012's Against All Odds pay-per-view, Sorensen was struck with Ion's knee during a moonsault, fell to the floor and didn't get up. Fans inside the Impact Zone reacted in horror as they watched him being taken out on a stretcher, fearing they had just witnessed something similar to what happened with Droz over a decade beforehand. The fear was that Sorensen could be paralyzed as his entire body had gone numb, but with some treatment, he began to regain feeling and felt a tingling sensation in his legs. Though there was an attempt to make an angle out of the incident, this was, in effect, the end of Sorensen's TNA career. But it wasn't the end of his wrestling career, as a year and a half later, he returned to action on the independent circuit, having recovered from his broken neck, and several years later worked a handful of matches for NXT, and even more recently popped up in AEW. Number 6, Yoshihiro Takayama. Anyone who has seen his legendary fight with Don Frye knows that Yoshihiro Takayama is one tough son of a sailor. Not that his parents were sea folk or anything, I just needed something other than the B word so that this video doesn't get demonetized by YouTube. Those no good bunch of sailors. Anyway, Takayama, a former IWGP, GHC heavyweight and Triple Crown champion, is well known for his toughness and ability to absorb punishment and was pretty much the walking embodiment of fighting spirit. During the 2004 New Japan G1 Climax tournament, Takayama engaged in an especially brutal match with Kensuke Sasaki, with some Japanese wrestling journalists calling it one of the most intense bouts in history. Takayama won the match, thanked his opponent, and engaged in post-match interviews, but collapsed shortly thereafter and was rushed to hospital. It was believed that he had suffered a stroke and was diagnosed with cerebral thrombosis, a blood clot on the brain that could have called time on his days as an active competitor. But 2 years later, he was back, returning to team with Sasaki against Yun Akiyama and Mitsuharu Misawa. Talk about easing yourself back into the swing of it, eh? Takayama had many more fruitful years in wrestling before a spinal cord injury suffered in 2017 ended his career for good. Of course, if there's one thing we've learned from this countdown, for good doesn't really mean diddly. Number 5, Daniel Bryan. Daniel Bryan is one of WWE's most unlikely success stories. Not because he's not talented, oh no, but because no matter how talented he is, he will always be less than 6 feet tall, weigh less than 250 pounds, and is, get this, a vegan. Bryan was far from the prototypical WWE star, which made it all the sweeter when he beat 2 of them in the main event of WrestleMania 30 to become WWE champion. It was a crowning moment of a long journey that had seen the American Dragon wrestle all over the world, from high school gyms to the Tokyo Dome and beyond. Riding a wave of popularity not seen for years, it looked as though nothing could stop D-Bry, except for a cruel injury. Neck surgery kept him out of the ring for a while, but he returned and continued where he left off, winning the Intercontinental Championship at WrestleMania 31. Knocked for 6 by concussions, however, Bryan disappeared shortly after and formally announced his retirement on February 8, 2016. He took the role of SmackDown General Manager, but yearned for a return to the ring. Thankfully, over 2 years later, and almost 3 since his last match, Bryan was able to come back to wrestle at WrestleMania 34, and he's continued to be one of the best in the world ever since. Number 4, Kerry Von Erich. Kerry Von Erich had it all. Good looks, Herculean physique, natural charisma and talent, and a surname that would have made him a superstar in Texas, even if he didn't possess all of the above. But he did. Some of us are just gifted like that, you know? He was a rock star in the Lone Star State, and he lived it up, often to excess, and a motorcycle accident on June 4th, 1986 not only almost ended his career, but nearly took his life. Kerry was riding at a high speed, weaving in and out of traffic, and wasn't wearing a helmet when he crashed into a police car, oh the irony, suffering a dislocated hip, internal injuries, and almost crushing his right leg. Having attempted to walk on his injured limb before it had fully healed, he injured it further and doctors were forced to amputate his foot. As the main star for the family's promotion, Kerry rushed back into the ring after just 6 months and wrestled with a prosthetic. This was kept secret for years, and somewhat amazingly, Kerry was still a great performer in the ring, signing with WWE in 1990 and achieving Intercontinental title success as the Texas Tornado. Number 3, Steve Austin. Steve Austin was on a serious roll heading into the summer of 1997. Holding both the Intercontinental and Tag Team titles, the former ringmaster had gone from strength to strength since his iconic promo at King of the Ring a year prior, and was on his way to becoming a megastar. Squaring off with Owen Hart at SummerSlam, Stone Cold placed his IC belt on the line in a match where, if he lost, he would have to kiss the backside of his opponent. The match was a sizzler, and Austin would have won it cleanly with his signature stunner had something not gone horribly wrong in the closing stretch. Owen dropped the Texas Rattlesnake on his head with a sit-out piledriver, causing him to experience temporary paralysis. Somehow, Austin managed to finish the match with the worst-looking roll-up ever, but the injury not only put him out of action for the next several months, it also led to him needing major neck surgery in late 1999. By that point, he was arguably the hottest star the business had ever seen, but wasn't sure that he would even want to return if he was indeed able to. He would come back after almost a year on the shelf and reclaim his position as the top star in the industry, main event another WrestleMania, and coin one of the most annoying catchphrases of all time. Number 2, Kurt Angle. Did you know that Kurt Angle won an Olympic gold medal in freestyle wrestling with a broken freaking neck? I bet you did, because WWE were kind enough to remind us every time our hero was on screen. Given the severity of the damage done in '96, Angle knew that he was wrestling on borrowed time as he shot up the ranks faster than just about everyone in history, completing the WWE Grand Slam and developing into one of the best workers in the game after just a couple of short years. In the run-up to WrestleMania 19, however, those familiar feelings of numbness and pain returned, and Angle knew that he would have to go under the knife sooner rather than later. He made it through the Mania main event, dropping the WWE title to Brock Lesnar in a match where he knew one wrong move or bump could leave him unable to walk again. Angle got the surgery, a new, less invasive type that cut rehab time from 1 year to a mere few months, but his neck troubles were far from over, as he broke it a further 3 times within a period of a little over a year. It's amazing that Angle was even able to tie his shoelaces, let alone continue wrestling at the standard he did all the way up until 2019. Number 1, Shawn Michaels. The premier performer of the 90s, Shawn Michaels looked as though he was intentionally trying to shorten his career by going out night after night and well and truly earning the nickname the Showstopper. His big bumping style was not designed for longevity, but it was actually one specific, innocuous looking fall that would lead to doctors suggesting that he retire. Defending the WWE title against The Undertaker in a casket match at the 1999 Royal Rumble, HBK clipped the wooden coffin while taking a backdrop over the top rope. He finished the match and everything seemed alright, but the next day Michaels couldn't get out of bed and he knew that something was seriously wrong. He had herniated 2 discs and crushed one completely, leaving him in considerable pain. He was taken off all shows and would next don the tights at WrestleMania 14, gutting it out to drop the belt to Steve Austin in the main event before undergoing the surgery that would stop him from wrestling. Comebacks were rumoured, but with each passing year, it seemed less and less likely until the stars aligned and Shawn found God. His back healed and his personal life sorted out, Michaels was able to resume his career after 4 years on the outs. Not only that, but his second run was also, somehow, even better than his first.